There was a time when the world woke up at the same pace. News arrived once a day, printed overnight, delivered in the morning. What mattered was decided hours earlier, by editors you would never meet, using information that was already old by the time it reached your hands. This wasn't a limitation, it was the structure. Newspapers didn't just report events, they synchronized reality. Entire cities moved to the same headlines. Markets reacted together. Opinions formed inside the same margins. For more than a century, this was how society understood itself, not through screens, not through alerts, but through paper. An industry built on presses, ink, delivery routes, advertising empires, and physical scarcity. If something was important, it appeared in print. If it wasn't printed, it barely existed. Then something changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically. The news didn't disappear, but the waiting did. And once people stopped waiting for the world to update, the newspaper lost the one thing it could never survive without: time. This is the story of newspaper. For decades, newspapers weren't just influential, they were wealthy. This wasn't because people paid for the paper. It was because attention could be sold. Advertising didn't surround the news, it funded it. Classified ads paid the bills, full-page spreads shaped brands. Local businesses depended on print to exist at all. Every copy printed increased value. Every route expanded reach. Scale wasn't optional, it was the business. And because distribution was physical, competition was limited. A city could support only a few papers. Printing presses were expensive. Delivery networks were difficult to replicate. This gave newspapers something rare: control. They controlled when information arrived, where it arrived, and who could afford to speak inside it. For more than a century, this system worked. Not because it was perfect, but because nothing else could match its reach at the same cost. Then the economics shifted. Not when people stopped caring about news, but when advertisers discovered they no longer needed the paper to reach them. The first damage wasn't visible to readers. The papers were still delivered. The headlines still appeared. The presses still ran at night. What disappeared first was the money. Advertisers didn't leave because journalism failed. They left because targeting became possible. For the first time, businesses could reach individuals instead of crowds. They could measure attention instead of guessing. They could pay for results instead of space. Classified ads vanished almost overnight. Local businesses followed. National brands redirected budgets elsewhere. The newspaper didn't lose its audience all at once. It lost its subsidy. Without advertising, the economics collapsed inward. Newsrooms shrank. Pages thinned. Foreign bureaus closed. Local reporting became optional. But to readers, the change felt subtle. The paper was still there. It just contained less of the world each day. By the time circulation started to fall, the damage was already done. The business model had broken long before the product showed it. And once information stopped needing a physical container, the newspaper lost the last advantage it could defend. By the time readers noticed something was wrong, they were already gone. Not because they stopped caring about news, but because news stopped waiting for them. Updates arrived instantly. Stories refreshed continuously. Breaking events no longer belonged to the next morning. They lived in the moment. The newspaper couldn't compete with this speed. Not because it was slower, but because slowness was the product. What once felt authoritative now felt delayed. What once felt curated now felt incomplete. And gradually, without announcement, a new interface took over. The phone didn't just deliver the news, it personalized it. Ranked it, filtered it, tracked it. The reader was no longer part of a crowd. They became an individual stream. This didn't kill journalism. It killed the idea that everyone should see the same world at the same time. The newspaper survived as a format, but it lost its position. And once it stopped being the default way people understood reality, it became optional. Despite everything, newspapers did not vanish completely. Some still print, some still deliver, some still matter in very specific places. Not because they won the transition, but because replacement came with limits. Paper still works when power fails. It still functions without accounts, algorithms, or batteries. It can be archived, referenced, and trusted in ways screens cannot. Courts rely on print records. Institutions depend on physical proof. Certain readers value permanence over speed. So the presses didn't stop everywhere. They retreated. Fewer pages, fewer days, smaller audiences. What remains is no longer a mass medium. It's a remnant. A system that once synchronized the world now survives at the edges of it, serving those who still need certainty instead of immediacy. This is how newspapers end, not with disappearance, but with irrelevance. And once something becomes optional, its place in everyday life is already over. What newspapers ultimately lost was not relevance. It was authority over time. For generations, reality arrived on schedule. Morning papers told you what mattered. Evening conversations followed. Disagreement existed, but it unfolded inside a shared frame. People argued over the same facts, the same events, the same headlines. The newspaper was not neutral, but it was common. When that common rhythm disappeared, something deeper broke. Information no longer arrived together. It arrived continuously, unevenly, and personally. Each person began living inside a different version of the present. The phone did not replace the newspaper by being more accurate. It replaced it by being immediate. And immediacy changed the meaning of truth. What mattered was no longer what endured long enough to be printed. What mattered was what appeared first, what spread fastest, what held attention longest. In that world, the newspaper could not compete. Not because it was wrong, but because it was slow by design. The collapse of newspapers is often framed as a business failure, a story about advertising, platforms, and revenue. But that is only half the loss. What disappeared with the newspaper was a shared sense of when things mattered. A society that once waited together now reacts alone. This pattern does not stop with news. It repeats wherever time was once structured by paper, delivery, and delay, and then absorbed by a screen that never sleeps. Newspapers were not the first system to fall this way. They will not be the last.